Okay, good morning, everyone. I see Banamer's here. Good morning to you. Good morning, Baha. Who else is here? I see maybe two or three more people. Karen's here. Good morning. Haneen is here. Good morning, Haneen. Mashid is here. Good morning. Morning, Jenna. How are y'all doing this morning? Are you good? Did you sleep well? Casey's here. Good morning, Casey. Yeah, everybody doing okay? If you're here in Vancouver, you'll notice it's not super sunny today. Maybe that'll change, but a little cloudy at the moment. Jenna's feeling a little sleepy. Yeah, me too. Me too, Jenna. I went to bed early last night, but I'm still feeling a little sleepy, so that'll pass. That's what this stuff is for, right? Justin's here. Good morning, Justin. Who else? So we've only got 8. I'll just give it another minute or so, and then I'll start. I think on Friday we should try to have our first little oral quiz in this class, okay? And so what I imagine that to work like, I've never done this before, so we'll find out how it works. But how I imagine it to work is I'll just set up a meeting in Microsoft Teams, and then people can kind of just join that meeting one at a time. I'll ask them a question or maybe two little questions. You'll answer them as best you can, and then you just pop out of the meeting, and then the next person comes in, okay? So it's very easy. I just ask you a question on what we've been talking about. You give me kind of the best answer you can, and then that's it, okay? So I'm thinking it should be really easy, but I guess we'll see how it goes, okay? I've never kind of done little oral quizzes like that before, and I certainly haven't done them online. So yeah, we'll just see how that works out for us, okay? But I'll talk about that a little more once everyone's here. There's only about 8 of us here right now, but just to give you a little bit of a preview, I guess. Okay, let's dive into this stuff, okay? So yesterday we were talking about what culture is, right? And we said that in understanding humans and human behavior, understanding culture is incredibly important because, like I mentioned, humans are not really born with any software. We're not really born with any programming. Basically, everything has to be taught to us from the time that we're little babies, like this guy here, all the way till we're in our teens and maybe even in our 20s, or maybe even longer than that. Good morning, Tisa. We require this sort of downloading of an operating system. We require enculturation or socialization. And so if you want to understand how humans behave and how humans act in society, then you have to understand culture, because culture is a huge part of how we choose to behave, right? Yeah, and the other important part, the other thing I want to mention about this enculturation process or socialization process too, and I'll reinforce this a bunch of times as we go, but socialization is involuntary. Okay, so socialization is involuntary. We don't choose for it to happen. We don't choose which culture we're born into, and we don't often get to choose the types of social messages that we absorb. Often we kind of absorb some of these values and beliefs without really knowing that we do, and then we just kind of come to know them, or we come to believe them. And so it's important to remember, and I'll explain why later, but it's important to remember that socialization is not optional, so you can't choose. And sometimes you're socialized without really knowing that you're being socialized. We kind of learn these social lessons without really knowing it. And again, if you think, I used an example a couple days ago about if you bump into someone in the street, someone that you, not a friend, but someone that you kind of know, you will stand a certain distance apart from them when you talk. And both of you will kind of know the right distance, right? You'll know what's comfortable. If the other person stands too close, then it's uncomfortable, it's too much, right? And you might back away without really even thinking of it. And if the other person stands too far away, you might be thinking, well, why are they standing all the way over there? And you might take a step to move a little bit closer, right? So we all have this kind of space, this sort of comfortable space between us. But again, nobody teaches us that, right? Our parents never say, this is how far you should stand apart from someone. Nobody ever says that, at least I don't think. But we do learn it anyway, and we do sort of come to know it. And that's just one piece of culture, or that's just one way in which we're socialized. We're socialized in thousands of other ways, okay? Yeah, and so we said that culture was this. It was a system. It was a system of shared beliefs and values. And of course, I had you read about beliefs and values a little bit yesterday, and we'll talk about those today. And behaviors and artifacts and things that are common to members of a society. And so again, I think it's a useful metaphor or a useful analogy to think of culture as software for humans. Okay, so we've got our hardware, we've got our physical bodies, and we've got our brains, and then our software is our culture, right? And that we download that from society, but it takes quite a long time, right? It takes years and years for us to learn everything we need to know, and we're still learning. I showed you this diagram. I said that there are lots of different aspects of culture, some of which are very visible in terms of people's food or dress or language or cultural celebrations, but lots of the more interesting stuff is below the surface. It's things that are not obvious from the outside, and sometimes they're not even obvious to members of the culture themselves, unless they purposely think about their culture and what they believe. And so you can see here, as you kind of get deeper into culture, these cultural rules and lessons that people learn become more unconscious, so people don't really know that they believe them, and they don't really know why. But there also becomes a stronger emotional attachment to those ideas. And so if you break the rules related to one of these deeper parts of culture, people will have a stronger reaction to it, okay? And so I introduced this term socialization, the process of learning the norms and the values of our society, okay? And I made a point to say that socialization and culturation, for our purposes in this class, they're the same thing. In comparative culture, we'll talk about enculturation. Here, we'll mostly talk about socialization, but for us, we'll just say that they're the same thing. They're the process of learning your culture, learning your cultural norms, okay? Yeah, and so in the process of learning these things, we learn how to behave appropriately in society, right? And so, for instance, I have learned how to be a man, I've learned how to be a brother, I've learned how to be a son, I've learned how to be a teacher, a friend, a Canadian citizen. All of these kind of roles that I play in my life, I have learned through socialization, and you have too. You've learned how to play all of the roles that sort of define who you are when you sort of go out into society as well. And interestingly, sometimes when people break social rules, we don't really identify the fact that they have, right? We just know that someone they're not acting right? They're acting weird or something like that. We just have this sort of unconscious sense. Oh, good morning, Sam. We have this kind of unconscious sense. Okay, let's give this a whirl. So, I asked you to read from the textbook, just this one section, section 3.2, and then I asked you to answer the following questions. Now, before I ask you the questions, I want to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how easy was it to read that text? So 1 being it was super, super difficult and I could barely understand it, to 10 being it was totally easy, super easy read. How easy of a read was that textbook for you on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being super, super hard, 1 being easy, no problem. How was it? Oh, Krish is here too. Good morning, Krish. How easy was it to read? Okay, so we've got, so it's an 8 and an 8. That's good. What else? How did other people find it? Sam says 8. Okay, that's good news so far. Maybe that's it. Okay. Well, if that's roughly, if that 8 is reflective of everyone, then that's good, right? Because, yeah, I'm happy. I thought it would be an okay read for you, but I just wanted to check for sure. Okay. All right. So let's try this. We've got these 3 questions, and maybe what I'll ask you to do is to, if you can, copy and paste an answer into the live chat here, okay? So first question, of course, is what's the difference between values and beliefs? What's the difference between values and beliefs? So if you can, copy your answer or part of your answer and throw it into the live chat here, and then we can talk about it, okay? Let's give you a second to do that. Okay, so Karen says that values are used for determining acceptable behavior and actions, while beliefs are things that people believe in. Okay. Let's see. Mashid, what does Mashid say? Mashid says values are the quality of a culture for identifying what is good and what is fair in society. Values are strongly important for transferring a culture's beliefs. Okay, that's good. Sheet also says that beliefs are principles or convictions that people hold to be true. People in a society can have their own beliefs, but they can also hold common values. Good. Haneen says beliefs are what you think is true. Yeah, okay. And Lisa says that values are a standard of the culture in the community that everyone considers right and good for society. They're recognized and conveyed in their belief to that society. Okay, good. And also, beliefs are the views of everyone in society, which holds to be true. Each person has specific beliefs, and it may be different from the beliefs of each group of people. Okay, that's good. Casey says people can share the same values, especially if you have the same culture, but can have different beliefs in life. Yeah, well, that's certainly true as well. Having values and knowing how to act or behave in a society. Beliefs are just assumptions that we make. Okay, that's all good stuff. And beliefs are what, Sam says, beliefs are what people think. Okay, so all of that is good stuff, right? All of that is good stuff. So I think you've covered all of the differences between you. I just made a couple of very, very quick notes. Haneen also says, I'll throw this up here. Haneen says values come from experience of a human being, your experience of being a human, something is important to you, something that's important to you. Yeah, that's true as well, Haneen. Yeah, and so values are the things. I think you've all said this, and probably better than I have. I just made some really quick notes here. But the sort of central thread of values is that they are what people judge to be good and bad, right? So what things do we value? What things are important? What things do we want in life, right? What does it mean to be a good person? What does it mean to be a good husband or wife, or boyfriend or girlfriend, or son or daughter? What does it mean to be a good student? What kind of things should you do or should you pursue in your life, right? All of those things are values. And you're very right as well, all of you. Beliefs are the things that people think are true, right? So sometimes this has to do with how we think the universe works, or how we think society works, or how people are, right? What are people like in general? We have beliefs about that. Yeah, so I think we've covered it. So values are kind of what we agree are good and bad and right and wrong. Beliefs are the things that we think are true, the ways that we think the world actually works. But I liked all of your answers. All of your answers were really good. Awesome. The second one, how do societies encourage people to act according to cultural values? Okay. So you can put your answers up in the comments or in the live stream chat or as well there. Number two, how do societies encourage people to act according to cultural values, right? And this is an interesting process. We'll talk more about this. But Casey says here, societies encourage people to act according to cultural values by simply giving rewards to those who obey and implementing punishments to those who do not. Yeah, that's good. Lisa says, encouraging people to recognize cultural values. It's through encouragement and punishment to make people obey those laws. Yeah, that's good. Mashid says, if people obey social expectations and maintain their beliefs, they're often praised. Yeah, that's true too. What else do we have? Anything else we want to add to that? Because we could add something to that. Karen says this is by spreading information and notions that support cultural values. That's true. And actually, Karen, that's a good point, because we should point out that even though we're socialized when we're young by our parents and by our family members and our teachers and people close to us, we continue to socialize each other, right? And so this is exactly what we're talking about. When someone breaks a social rule, we try to do something to get them to follow the rule again, right? Whether we punish them, or when somebody actually follows the rule, we reward them. So we're kind of continually socializing each other, right? By trying to get everyone to follow the rules. And when they don't follow the rules, we kind of punish them a little bit, right? Okay, let me see what I had here. So I said, yeah, there was the textbook talked about systems of rewards or sanctions or punishments. And so again, like you said, people who follow the norms of society, people who conform to those norms, they get rewarded. And people who disobey society's norms might get sanctioned, right? Or they might even get punished if it's a formal rule. And so the last one here is, what are norms? And can you think of one or two norms in your own culture, and what happens if you violate it? So there's three questions in there. 3 questions. Let's start with the first one. What what is a norm? What is a cultural or a societal norm? Let's just start with that one. Okay. Ivan says hello. Good morning, Ivan. Um, Haneen says norms are something that is usual or standard, unwritten rules that are acceptable in society. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Thesa says norms help us to know the appropriate conduct, which is exactly, and individuals in society adhere to that norm. Yeah, that's correct, right? It tells us what's appropriate behavior. Mashid says norms determine how to act according to what a society has described as proper and essential. That's good. And Chris says something you are not supposed to do. Um, yes, I would say that norms are things that you are supposed to do, but if you don't follow them, then you're doing something. Then you're doing something that you're not supposed to. KC says norms are what we have to follow because it is what the society has defined as such in laws. Yeah, that's true. That's true as well. Um, okay, that's all good. So norms are kind of the way in which we behave. And so the way I kind of like to think about the difference between norms and values is values are often a little more general. Okay, they're a little more um, yeah, they're a little more generalized. And so, you should be nice to your mother, right? That's a behaving, lovingly toward your mother is a good thing, right? But norms are a little more specific, right? So, what do you do when you meet someone in the street, right? Someone that you know. Do you shake, well, you don't shake their hands anymore because of coronavirus, but before you shook their hands, right? Maybe you hug them, maybe you give them a little kiss on each cheek, depending on what your society or culture sees as normal, right? The norms in your society. Um, so norms are kind of a little more specific and a little more connected to a situation. Values are, I think, are a little more general and things that we think are good or bad. So now, what are some of the norms that you know about? Okay, so either in your culture or in Canadian culture or just anywhere, what are some norms of behavior that you can suggest? So one of them, I think I just said actually, is when you meet someone, traditionally we shake hands, right? At least we do here in the West. That's okay, Jimmy. I'm glad you're here. What are some norms? So Haneen says, oh, eye contact with the person you're speaking with. That's a really good one. And it's not, interestingly, it's not true of all cultures. Um, in our culture and maybe in yours, Haneen, eye contact is seen as um, it means I'm paying attention, right? I'm listening to you, I'm connected with you. But in some cultures, too much eye contact is really aggressive, um, and so they kind of discourage eye contact. And even so, too much eye contact can be too much, right? If someone is staring at you and will not break their eye contact, it's too much, right? But I mean, yeah, you're actually absolutely right. Eye contact when you're speaking with someone is a good one. Yeah, being kind to the elderly is another one, right? So if you're on the bus and an older person gets on, you should give your seat to them, or you should give them some space, right? And you should treat them with respect. That's good. Okay, so Karen says kneeling while greeting elders, right? So I'm gonna guess that's specific to your culture, Karen. It's not the way we that's not a norm in our society, but yeah, that's a perfect one as well, and connected with Haneen's, right? There are norms in terms of how we treat people who are older than us or people who are kind of higher status than us, right? Yeah. What else? Other norms. What other norms are there? There's tons of them. I'm sure nobody has ever counted them. There's probably thousands. Um, Here in Canada, we like to hold the door for people. And so if you go through a door and someone is coming through behind you, generally the expectation is to hold it open for them so they can come through as well. Again, I don't think that's a norm everywhere in the world, but here in Canada, we like to do that. KC says, in my culture, we use the words po and opo when talking to someone older. Yeah, as a sign of respect. Yeah, and lots of languages have those things, right? Those title or status markers. So we either switch to slightly different slightly different pronouns when we talk to someone who's higher status than us, or we use titles like that, right? That's a good one. Let's see. Hinin says, when you're at someone else's home, ask permission to do things such as turning on the television or using the bathroom. Yeah, that's nice too, right? When you're a guest in someone's home, they might say make yourself at home, but you're still not going to act as if it's your own home, right? You're going to ask permission to do things. Yeah, so that's good. Erica says, don't interrupt people when they're conversing, especially elders. Yeah, when people are talking, you're usually expected to wait until people stop talking, and then you can say your thing, right? Particularly with people who are older than you or have more kind of status or power, right? Yeah, that's good, Erica. Now, what happens if we violate any of these norms? What happens if we break the rules, either accidentally or on purpose? Karen also says, giving visitors something to eat even though they're there for a short time. Yeah, it's another cultural norm. Somebody comes over to your house, you're expected to offer them food. Yeah, that's a good one. Good morning, Monica. Good morning. Yeah, so if you break the rules, if you break cultural norms, what happens? What happens? It does depend on which rule you break, but what are some of the results of breaking a social rule? I know here in Canada, if, again, coronavirus aside, but here in Canada, if you meet someone and they reach their hand out to shake your hand and you don't take it, it's kind of a little, maybe offensive is too strong, but it's a little bit strange, right? You think, well, why won't this person shake my hand? And it kind of unbalances the exchange a little bit. It feels weird. People usually won't say anything or do anything, but you will see them get a little confused for a moment. Let's see. Oh, Sam says being on time is another cultural norm. That's a good one too. And probably depending on your culture. Some cultures I think are more they are more interested in keeping time. Other cultures I think are a little more relaxed in terms of timing. But yeah. Karen says if you break social norms, you could become an outcast, right? And of course it depends on what social rule you break. If you're going to be outcast, if you're going to be rejected from society, you have to break a pretty big social norm, but it's definitely possible. Baha says, yeah, you might be rejected from society. Okay, that's a good one. People might look at you strange, says Sam. And that's very true, right? If we were still in class and we were still going to school, if I came to school wearing a dress, people would look at me strange, right? I would be violating a social norm because for the most part, men aren't supposed to wear dresses. And so I would get a lot of strange looks, right? People would be very confused about that. Lisa, if we violate those norms, people will evaluate our yeah, they might judge us, right? They might, and we might know it because they might look at us in a certain way, right? We might be feeling judged by people around us if we violate a social norm, right? If we break a social norm. Okay, I think we're doing good. We're doing good. Let's go back here. So you're very right. Values and beliefs. Values are the things that a society decides are good or bad. I'm just going to throw this up here, Jimmy. So line up or give seat on a bus to pregnant women and elders. Yeah, that's absolutely true too. If someone gets onto the bus who you feel might need a seat, you're kind of expected to give them that seat, right? And lining up as well is there are norms associated with that, right? We are, at least in Canada here, we're expected to line up to form a nice line, and we're supposed to respect who was there first, right? And we're not supposed to go and get our thing or enter the place before someone who was there before us, right? That's a norm. So values are things that people hold to be good or bad. Beliefs have to do with things that people think are true or false, right? In terms of the way society works or the way people are. We say that cultural values are maintained by either rewarding or punishing some people, or sanctioning people. And this is a form of social control, right? It keeps people behaving according to social rules. And imagine, if you will, for a second, a world where there were no social rules and nobody obeyed them at all. It would be a very uncomfortable and chaotic world to live in, right? When people were just behaving however they felt, right? It would be kind of an awful world to live in. So there's a lot of rules that us humans follow every day, and many of those we don't even consider, right? We don't even think. We just kind of follow them anyway. And finally, we said that norms are kind of specific instructions about how to behave. And so it's kind of like, if you're in this situation, this is what you do, right? If you bump into someone that you know on the street, you shake their hands and you ask them how they are, right? And maybe you talk to them for a few minutes. And the textbook makes a distinction here between formal norms, so things that are actually written down, which we might call laws, and informal norms, so things that are kind of just casual behaviors that people, sort of know how they work. Okay, so just for a little bit of fun, and just to illustrate this topic better, I wanted to talk about this television show. And I don't know if you've seen it before, or if you know about it, or if you don't. Show's called Seinfeld. And Seinfeld ran for about 10 years, kind of in the 1990s. It was very popular at the time, still is. You can still see it. You can still see it on TV, and I don't know if it's on Netflix or not. It might be. And the show revolves around these kind of four friends who know each other, living in New York. And Seinfeld it's a funny show, at least I think it's a funny show. But Seinfeld is very good at exposing societal norms, and then they kind of violate them, okay? So lots of the comedy in this show comes from the writers either finding a social norm, getting the characters to break it, and then seeing what happens, having a reaction to it, or they find a situation where the norm is not clear, okay? It's not really, people don't really know what they're supposed to do in a certain situation, okay? And again, Seinfeld is really good at coming up with those situations and then making them funny. Good morning, Duong. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to show you a few clips from Seinfeld, a few little parts of the show. And what I'd like you to do is, in the comments, tell me what social norm is being violated, okay? What rule is being broken? And what's probably going to be interesting for you is that, again, these are all rules that for the most part nobody has taught us. We just kind of seem to know, okay? And again, there might be some cultural differences here, I realize, but let's just see how it goes. So again, I'm going to show you some clips. I'm going to show you some clips of the show, and you're going to tell me what social rule is being broken, okay? So here we go.
Little? What do you think, Jerry?
Well, this is it. The food is atrocious, but the bus boys are the best in the city. May I take your coat, miss?
Yes, thank you.
Both times I've seen her, she's worn the same dress.
Are you okay, Jerry? You seem quiet.
What in God's name is going on here? Is she wearing the same thing over and over again? Or does she have a closet full of these like Superman? I've got to unlock this mystery. Ah, so this is the Fortress of Solitude.
Well, I guess I'll go change.
Yes, change. By all means, change. August 17th, 1992. The same dress. She never changes. Oh, my God.
Okay. So, what social rule is being violated there? What's going wrong? Yeah, Karen says we're not supposed to repeat clothes, right? You're not supposed to wear the same thing over and over again. Again, nobody usually tells us this, right? This is not something that our parents tell us or our friends teach us, but we just kind of instinctively know, right? And so in the show here, this woman seems to be wearing the same dress all the time. And yeah, it's kind of funny. And you can see Jerry is kind of, he's freaking out a little bit, right? Because she's violating this social rule, and he is, he's very confused, right? He's not really sure what's going on. Sorry, I'm just going to close a few of my things here because the playback was kind of slowing down, so I'm going to see if I can make it easy on my phone or on my laptop here. Yeah, she only likes to wear one type of clothes apparently, right? Which is strange, right? We're encouraged in society to wear more than one thing, right? Okay, let me show you another one here. Okay. All right.
Hey, isn't that George's father?
Oh, yeah, it is. Should we say hello?
I've never seen him in Manhattan before. It's weird. He's so out of context.
That man he's with. Is he wearing a cape?
I believe he is wearing a cape.
Why is Mr. Costanza with a man in a cape?
Well, it is good cape weather. Cool, breezy.
Why a cape? Who wears a cape? Where do you even get a cape?
You're right. It is strange. In fact, let's cross to the other side of the street. Cover me.
So, what social rule is being broken here? Okay, actually that's an interesting one, Casey. I don't think that's not the main part of the scene, but it's true, right? You can see Elaine is kind of struggling with all the groceries, and Jerry seems to not be paying attention to it at all, right? Yeah, actually I missed that one, but that's a good one too. Erica says, yeah, this guy is wearing a cape, right? Karen says he's wearing odd clothes. And Mashid says, yeah, wearing a cape is not very normal, right? Unless you're Batman, wearing a cape is kind of a weird thing to do, right? Jimmy says too. Jimmy noticed also that the man was not helping her carry the groceries. So yeah, there's a very interesting thing going on here in terms of what we noticed. And so I'm not sure why that is, but it's interesting that we've watched this clip and sort of picked up on different things. Yeah, so he's not helping her with the groceries, which is kind of supposed to be funny, but also the man's wearing a cape, right? And you can see that there's a bit of a punishment for that because they both think it's weird, And yeah, Baha, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, they both think it's weird and they say, let's cross to the other side of the street, right? Let's ignore them. Let's not go say hi because that's strange over there, right? And so that's a perfect example of a social sanction or a social punishment, right? We see someone breaking a social rule, and so we're going to punish them by like not talking to them or ignoring them. Yeah, so they don't say hi to these people that they know because he's wearing a cape, right? Okay. Let's see what else do I have for you? Oh yeah, this one. Okay. Let's have a look at this one.
But someone was crying, and I want to know who it was.
Well, it's a long story, okay? But my stupid friend Jerry told my other friend Noreen that she was... Hey, you want to hear something weird? Mr. Pitt eats his Snickers bars with a knife and fork.
Really?
Yes.
Why does he do that?
He probably doesn't want to get chocolate on his fingers. That's the way the society types eat their candy bars. Forgive me for trying to class up this place. For trying to have the Yankees reach another strata of society that might not watch Channel 11.
What the hell are you doing?
I am eating my dessert. How do you eat it? With your hands?
He's kind of a baritone, isn't he? What are you doing? I'm eating this cookie.
No, but why are you using a knife and a fork? Did you just think of that?
No, I've seen people do it. I like it. Here's your knife and fork.
Look, she's cutting up an almond joy.
I just don't get it.
You know, I saw someone on the street eating M&Ms with a spoon.
What is wrong with everybody?
Look, they're doing it. They're all doing it.
What is wrong with all you people?
Okay. So, what kind of social norm is being violated here? It's not a big one, right? It's a little one. But how are people breaking a social rule here? Yeah, they're using cutlery to eat hard desserts, right? Apparently, and I'm sure we haven't really thought about this, but there are kind of rules in terms of how you eat food, right? What kind of food you eat with a knife and fork, and what kind of food that you eat with your hands, right? And so, yeah, we usually don't eat chocolate bars with a knife and fork, right? That's a strange thing to do, and it does get explained. Like Lily says here, it does get explained by saying, oh, maybe they don't want to get chocolate on their hands, but it's still kind of an odd thing, right? And so what's interesting here is that a social norm is broken, right? Most people eat their chocolate bars just with their hands, but for some reason people start using a knife and fork. But as Mashid points out here, people actually start copying it. And so that's an interesting thing too, is that sometimes when social rules get broken, people kind of like it and they copy it. And so you see this happen all the time with celebrities, musicians, movie stars, Instagram influencers, people like that, they can kind of break a few social rules and then people will copy them, right? Because they're famous, because they're celebrities. And so some people can get away with breaking social rules, breaking social norms if other people seem to think it's a good idea and they want to copy it, or if that person has kind of high status, right? If they're very important in the society, sometimes they can manage to break social rules and have other people go along with it. But here you can see, yeah, we don't eat our desserts like that with a knife and fork. And at the end, you can see Jerry and Elaine kind of freaking out because it's quite bizarre. Let me see what else I have here. Oh, okay. I'm going to show you this one.
Bathroom.
Jerry. Tonight for a real treat. I'm personally going to pay the dinner for you and Audrey.
Jerry, you okay?
Huh?
Is anything...
Nothing.
You look like you've seen a ghost.
Is it?
Oh, wait till you taste this. Poppy's perfect.
Well,
Jerry, have some. You're not going to taste it? Jerry.
Yeah, so what social norm is being violated here? What rules being broken? What social rule is being broken in this little clip? Let's see. So Jimmy says here, yeah, that the chef or the staff should have a washroom, and the chef should wash his hands. Yeah. The guy did not wash his hands in the bathroom, and then he came out of the washroom, like Erica says, and yeah, then he starts cooking, right? We see him kind of we see him rolling the pizza dough with his hands, right? And of course you can see Jerry's reaction is horrified, right? And then he refuses to eat the pizza in the end, right? So yeah, we have rules around washing hands, right? You're supposed to wash your hands after you're done in the bathroom, and definitely before you start preparing food, right? That's a social rule, and this guy breaks it. Okay, one last little clip, okay? One last clip. Here we go.
What are you doing?
What?
Did you just double dip that chip?
Excuse me?
You double dipped the chip.
Double dipped? What are you talking about?
You dipped the chip, you took a bite, and you dipped again.
So?
That's like putting your whole mouth right in the dip. Look, from now on, when you take a chip, just take one dip and end it.
Well, I'm sorry, Timmy. But I don't dip that way.
Oh, you don't, huh?
No. You dip the way you want to dip. I'll dip the way I want to dip.
Give me the chip!
Hey, hey, hey!
Give me the chip!
Okay, so what rule? What's the social rule there? What social rule is being broken? What social rule is being broken there? Yeah, Karen says double dipping the chip, right? So we see George dip his chip, he bites it, and then he dips it again, right? Same chip. What is the rule for that? Is that a no-no? Are you not allowed to double dip chips ever? Or sometimes? What's the rule, guys? Is it okay? Is it not okay? Now that we're in public, maybe nobody wants to admit it. What's the rule? Should you double dip your chip or not? Erica says no, it's a no-no. No double dipping chips. Sam says okay, so if it's your own dip, right? If you've got your own if you've got your own personal bowl of dip, then go nuts, right? But if you're sharing with other people, no double dipping. Rashid says no, it's not hygienic, right? And in the little clip there in Seinfeld, Timmy agrees with you, Mashid, right? Timmy says it's like putting your whole mouth in the dip. Oh, that's interesting. So Jimmy says that the man interrupted while the other one was eating. Yeah, that's true. He actually stopped him from eating that chip, right? But that was a little bit part of the comedy, right? Because part of what we're talking about here is breaking the social rule, and then what's the consequence, right? And so here it's pretty extreme, right? Timmy corrects George, right? He says, no, you shouldn't double dip the chip. And then he actually goes to the extent of trying to tackle him, right? Trying to keep him from eating the chip. So it's a little ridiculous, but that's why it's funny, right? Okay, so we're doing pretty good. You want to take a little break? I'm guessing you probably do. So let's take 10-minute break, and then we'll come back, okay? Okay, people, we are back. So today we've been talking about a few different things, right? People are socialized within a society, and part of that socialization is people learning values, so things that are good or bad, or desirable or not desirable. Excuse me. Learning cultural or societal beliefs, so ideas about the way in which we think that the world works, or the way that people are. And finally, we learn norms, right? We learn these little behaviors that tell us what to do and when, right? If you're in this situation, this is what you do and this is what you don't do, right? And so I showed you a few Seinfeld clips, and of course there's hundreds of them out there. And many of them do exactly what we saw these clips do. They find a social rule and they break it, and then the characters react in sort of a funny way, right? And so the first one we saw, of course, was the dress, right? We identified the social rule is you're supposed to dress a little bit differently every day. You're not supposed to wear the same clothes, or at least you're not supposed to have, 10 of the same shirt, right? You're supposed to change it up a little bit. And again, I don't know that anyone has necessarily taught us this. I don't know that anyone ever taught me that, but it's kind of a rule that we all know. And so when we see Jerry's date kind of breaking this rule, we see Jerry kind of having a reaction, and he's kind of freaked out by it, right? We saw the restaurant scene where the cook doesn't wash his hands after using the washroom, right? And so Jerry is kind of freaked out about that. We see the cape, right? The man wearing the cape, and Jerry and Elaine are confused about why someone would wear a cape, because capes aren't generally part of what we wear here in Western society. And so they avoid him, right? They don't want to talk to him because he's doing something, he's violating a social norm. But also in that clip, there's the idea of Jerry's not helping Elaine with the groceries, right? She has bags of food, and the social custom would be for him to help her out, but he doesn't help her. So there was kind of two things going on in that one. And then finally, in the last one, we have the double dipping of the chip, right? George double dips the chip, and the other guy at the party tells him that he's breaking a social rule, and then physically tries to stop him, right? And it's interesting because a couple of those rules, so the washing the hands and the pizza and the double dipping of the chip, you could imagine that those rules exist for cleanliness and hygiene reasons, right? We want to keep things clean. We don't want people to get sick. We don't want people to kind of exchange germs and viruses with each other, right? We know that. But the other two are kind of interesting because they really don't harm anyone, do they? If someone chose to wear the exact same clothing every single day, that doesn't really harm anyone, right? There's no problem with that. The same thing with the cape. The guy in the cape is not harming anyone. Yeah, it's a little odd, but there's no problem with wearing the cape, and yet the characters have kind of reactions to the breaking of these social norms anyway. And so that's kind of what I want. Oh, I just got to go through a few slides here. That's kind of what I wanted to bring up to you here. Whoops. What I wanted you to bring up to you here is the idea that, Right. This is what I want to bring up to you here is that when we are socialized, we are taught these cultural norms, these societal norms, and we're often not aware that we're being taught these lessons, okay? So all of us, I think, recognized where the characters in Seinfeld broke the rules, but I think most of us probably weren't taught those rules directly. And so societal norms become a lens through which we see the world. We interpret people's actions, we judge other people's actions based on how they follow the rules, right? And so what I want to point out here is that many of us think that our ideas and our views and our opinions are our own, right? We've come to them ourselves. We've decided on them ourselves. But that's not entirely true. We've received a lot of software downloading, right? We've absorbed a lot of social messages about what we should or shouldn't do. And so when I get up in the morning, I don't have the choice to do anything in the world, right? I have a job that I have to come to here, right? I have to teach this class. I have to dress in a certain way. I have to speak in a certain way. I have to do certain things. When I go out of my apartment into the street, there's certain ways that I'm expected to behave, right? I'm supposed to wear clothes and I'm supposed to interact with people in a certain way. And so even though we have a lot of choices to make in our daily lives, there's a lot of ways in which we follow the rules that we've absorbed as part of our socialization, right? And so I'm pointing this out, or the things I'm trying to point out here, and again, we'll come back to them, but the important things is that we are socialized really without knowing it sometimes. We learn these kind of rules and behaviors without being taught directly. And secondly, because of that, we tend to follow them, right? We tend to act on our socialization without thinking very much about it, right? And so when I got up this morning and I got dressed, I didn't think about, oh, should I wear a dress today? No, I didn't think that, because that's not really a choice that's open to me. Yes, it sort of is, but there are going to be social sanctions if I choose to do that, which I'm not going to, right? So the main point here is that my choices are not unlimited, right? I have a lot of rules to follow and I make choices within those rules, okay? And finally, the social messages and the cultural information that we internalize has to do with our positionality. So it of course has to do with the society that we are born into, right? If I'm born into Canadian society, I'm going to learn different values and beliefs and norms than I would if I was born into Chinese society, right? I'm going to learn different things. But even within the same society, we will learn different sets of behaviors. We'll behave differently in the world depending on our gender, right? So if I'm a man, I will learn different rules for behaving than I will if I was a woman. Our sexuality, if you are straight or heterosexual, or if you are gay or lesbian or bisexual or pansexual or something else, you will have kind of different rules about how you can behave. Race, ethnicity, religion, all of these things will influence the kind of social messages that we receive, and it will influence the types of rules we have to follow, okay? So men and women in every society, men and women don't follow all of the same rules, right? We follow some of the same rules, but some rules and norms are specific to one gender or are specific to another, okay? And so again, this is part of the power of socialization, the fact that our programming, our software that we've downloaded shapes our perception of reality. It shapes what we see and what we feel and what we choose to do. Okay, so how are we doing with that so far? Does that make some kind of sense? Do you have some questions for me about socialization or beliefs or values or norms or Seinfeld or rewards or punishments or sanctions or how we are socialized sometimes without knowing it, or how we sometimes act on those social norms or social lessons without really choosing to or without really thinking about it? Does that all kind of Does that all kind of make sense? Let me know what you think there. Let me know what you think. Are you good? Are you not good? Let's see. Okay, Erica's good. Sam's good. Thumbs up. Karen's good. Okay. Hanine's all good. All right. All right. Lisa says good. Hopefully this will continue to make sense. Casey's good. Jenna's good. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna take that as everyone's okay. If you, if any questions come up, Lily's good. If any questions come up, I'll address them, but I've got a couple things I want to say. So at the beginning of class, I mentioned that I think we should do our first our first little oral quiz on Friday. And I will admit I've never really done these before, so I'm not really sure how they're going to go. But my plan is to do them in Microsoft Teams, and I'll kind of open a meeting, and then I'll just have people join one by one. Okay, and so you'll come into the meeting. I'll say, hey, how's it going? And then I'll ask you a question, and you'll sort of try to give me the best answer that you can. All right, so I'll say, you know, what's this thing, or tell me what you know about this, and you'll do the best you can to explain it to me. I'll kind of give you a mark, and then you'll leave that meeting, and then someone else will come in, okay? And so it'll take a little time to kind of cycle through everybody, but that's okay. At least we'll get a little bit of face-to-face interaction. I'll get to do, you know, a quick quiz with you just to kind of see where everyone is and how everyone's understanding things. Yeah, and so I think that's how that'll go. Okay. Again, I've never done it before, but I think it'll be fine. So on Friday, we'll do that quiz, and we'll just do it on the first part. So when we talked about critical theory and how to engage and all that stuff. So no, I think we can include socialization as well. Okay, so maybe everything up till today can be on the quiz. I can ask you anything, and so yeah, and we'll try it out. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so nobody needs to panic. Do a little bit of studying, but don't freak out. It should be okay. So we'll do that on Friday. Okay, so on Friday, be ready, be dressed so that you can be on camera with me and I can see you and talk to you. Okay. Yeah, and we'll have our little quiz. Okay. Also coming up, maybe tomorrow, I think I have a movie that I want to start showing you, and so we'll deal with that tomorrow as well. Until then, I have a short little piece of homework that I'd like you to do, and I think there might be enough time left in class for you to do it and email it to me before the end of class. So here's kind of what I'd like you to do, okay? And this has to do with our core competencies that we're dealing with in this course. And so the idea behind this is that part of what we want to do in our kind of high school career here is learn how to, how do I describe this? Kind of learn how to think about ourselves and think about who we are in relation to other people, who we are in relation to ourselves, who we are in relation to the world, right? So this is kind of we're thinking a little bit about us and our relationships to other people in the world. I didn't describe that very well, but that's kind of what it is. And here's what I'd like you to do. I just have a little bit of homework for you, okay? And what I want you to do is just write a few sentences, maybe 4 or 5 sentences, and I want you to think about a social or a cultural norm that you think is important, but maybe one that you think other people don't follow all the time, or maybe some people are not sure about, okay? So think about something that might bother you when you see it, okay? When you see people breaking this rule, you think to yourself, oh man, I hate when people do that, okay? And so what I want you to do is think about a norm, tell me what it is, and then explain how people break this rule and what consequences might follow it. So when people break this rule, what happens? Okay, so it's a very simple thing. Just come up with a social norm that you think people often break the rules, people often violate, and then tell me how people sanction people who break the rules. What are the punishments around that? Okay, so just a simple thing. Write a few sentences, and then maybe the easiest thing is just to email it to me. Okay, that's probably the easiest thing to do. I will, this little blurb here, I'll put that into Microsoft Teams so that you can see it right away. And maybe, you know, we have about 20 minutes left in class. I think that would be enough to sort of write something and then email it to me. And so maybe I think that's what I'll do is I'll give you the rest of the time today to complete this homework and think about a social norm that you see being violated sometimes that you wish wasn't, and what are the consequences for violating it? Or why are there no consequences if nobody is doing anything about it? Okay, so you can talk about a few different things. I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts about social norms and when people violate them and what happens. Okay, so that's kind of what I want you to think about. Yeah, so is that cool? Do you want to ask some questions or give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down? You can give me a thumbs down if you want, but I'm still going to ask you to do it. What do you think? Is that okay? Karen's okay. All right. Easy peasy. I hope. Jen is good. Lisa's good. Lily's good. Sam's good. Okay. Casey is good. All right. Well, I'm available after this if you have questions. But again, it's a pretty simple thing. I'm just kind of curious to see what your thinking is like in terms of social norms that are violated and what the consequences are. And if you kind of have an opinion about those things, that would be good as well. Okay. So maybe what I'll do is I'll sign off here from YouTube and I'll let you get to work. And then when you're done, you can just email it to me and I'll look it over. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to sign off. If you have questions, you can let me know. Otherwise, it was lovely to interact with you all this morning. I hope you had a good time. The Seinfeld stuff is kind of funny, so that helps. But yeah, finish that homework, email it to me, and I'll either see you in comparative cultures or I'll see you in about 20, or I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so that's it. See you.